Have you ever thought about what happens after death? What if someone came back with direct revelations from Jesus about 3 events that will soon shake the world? In today's story, you will meet Daniel Foster, an American truck driver who died briefly and was taken to a spiritual dimension where he saw the future of humanity. Global financial collapse, false peace between nations, and total control disguised as climate salvation. That's the message he was called to deliver. If you feel like something big is coming, this video is for you. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below which city you are watching so we can pray together. I know what you might be thinking. Another story of someone who died and saw lights. But what I experienced has no logical explanation. I died. Not metaphorically. I left my body. It was March 6th, 2023. I was driving my truck through the Sierra Nevada mountains. As I have done hundreds of times, it was still dawn. I like this time. It's as if the world were sleeping and only the truck drivers were awake with God. But that morning, time stopped. Literally. Everything around me turned white. A white that wasn't light. It was pure conscience. There was no road, there was no cabin, not even my hands on the steering wheel, only presence. I realized I wasn't breathing. There was no air. But I didn't miss him either. I couldn't feel my body. And at the same time, I was more alive than ever. That's when something started to vibrate inside me, as if a musical note was playing inside my spirit. A frequency that called me. And then, he appeared. It didn't walk. It didn't appear from afar. It was already there. Jesus. But not the one in paintings, in films. It was something impossible to describe with human words. It had no defined shape, but I knew it. My soul recognized it before my thoughts could react. And he spoke to me, but not with sound. It was as if he was thinking about me, and his thoughts were a language that passed through me completely. He said, "Daniel, you have been called to see. What will be shown needs to be said. There is still time, but time is short." It was then that the reality around us tore apart, as if the fabric of space opened up in layers, and I started to see. The first vision was a crowd running, yelling. There was panic as in a civil collapse. People were standing in front of banks, ATMs turned off, cell phones showing unavailable balance. Saw electronic boards changing languages. It was as if the entire world was connected to the same system, and it had frozen. Jesus spoke, again with regret. The system that man has trusted will be overthrown. A new order will emerge, and many will rush to it thinking it is salvation. Before I could react, the scene went up like smoke and I was swallowed up by another vision. This time, political maps exploded in lights. I saw world leaders shaking hands, and behind them shadows with empty eyes. They smiled for the cameras, but Jesus whispered, "This is the second fall. Peace built on fear, alliances without regret." Deep down, something hurt. A feeling of false hope, as if the entire world was being lulled by a beautiful lie. Then came the third vision, and it was the most violent. The earth screamed. I didn't hear with ears. I felt. The entire planet like a living organism, crying. I saw earthquakes in unlikely places, tsunamis sweeping cities, people looking up to the sky begging for answers, and the answer they gave them was control. I saw a system, hand scanners, family records, health data, security, all for the common good. But people were giving in, without knowing that it was the end of spiritual freedom. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder, and what I felt wasn't touch, it was weight. Real weight. Weight of love. He said, "These are the 3 triggers. They have already started, but there is still a chance. It depends on how you choose now." And then the vision stopped, but something burned inside me. One certainty. None of this is inevitable, but if we don't wake up, It will happen. Voice of Jesus echoes within me to this day. Daniel, tell them, hard times are coming, but I am still the way. The first vision, it still haunts me when I close my eyes. It wasn't an isolated scene. It was the entire world being swallowed by one invisible but relentless collapse. I was floating on what looked like an American city. Wide streets, billboards, well-known stores. But at the same time, there was something strange. Everything was too quiet, like in a movie before the explosion. And then, chaos came. We people rushing out of buildings, as if they had just received catastrophic news. Men in suits ripping off ties, women with their eyes wide open, children being dragged by their hands. They ran, where? For banks, for ATMs, for markets. But nothing worked. Cards were declined. Cell phones showed notifications. System error. Account not found. People started to scream and fight. Some fell to their knees in the middle of the street. I saw a lady crying, holding an envelope with old dollar bills. She knocked on the door of a closed bank saying, "But I trusted you. I trusted." It was then that I realized governments were collapsing. But it was more than an economic crisis. It was a reset, a restart, programmed. Jesus appeared at my side, and with eyes full of sadness he said, "Man worshipped gold more than me. Now the gold will be removed." Soon after, the signs on the avenues began to change, literally, like digital screens being reprogrammed. I saw slogans popping up in several languages at once. Global digital unity, your new identity, security, stability, hope. The queues started, long, endless. I saw whole families waiting to be registered. Some cried with relief, others seemed mesmerized. They scanned their hands, their faces provided personal data, and in return, they received access to a new control platform. A woman said, "At least now my son will have food." But Jesus made me look beyond, showed me what the natural eyes did not see. People were being marked, not just recorded, a mark that I couldn't see physically, but that burned in their spirits like an invisible current. And the most shocking thing? Saw churches supporting this. Pastors saying that God uses technology. Posters on church doors with QR codes that led directly to the identity system. I saw religious leaders who once preached against global control now saying, "God wants order, brothers. This is wisdom. No resistance." Jesus' voice cut the air like a sword. They call it wisdom, but it's surrender. They're leaving the rock for the sand. A deep pain took over my spirit. I saw good people being deceived, sincere people but spiritually asleep. And then Jesus said something that echoed with urgency. This is the first trigger. It will come when the world thinks it is getting back on its feet, but it will be the beginning of the great fall. At that moment, I understood. The fall of the world system will not be an explosion. It will be a false embrace, a solution disguised as salvation. And many, including ancient believers, they will accept. After the first vision, that economic collapse and the emergence of the digital system, the atmosphere around me changed. It wasn't subtle. It was as if the whole world had held its breath. A tense, heavy silence like when the sky darkens before a storm. Jesus was by my side, but his face, he was silent. Not as someone who has nothing to say, but as someone who feels pain for what is about to happen. The scene in front of me transformed. I saw falling flags, literally. Countries that for decades hated each other, now greeted each other with smiles, handshakes, and emotional speeches. There were crowds celebrating, fireworks, stages with leaders, saying phrases like, "The time for division is over. We have now entered the era of global unity." I saw what looked like a ceremony, something great, many heads of state present. But there was one man in the spotlight, tall, charismatic. His face was too charismatic, as if everything about it was carefully rehearsed to appear safe. He didn't say his name, but Jesus made me understand. This man did not come in my name, but he will be received as if he were. Something cut me inside at that moment, because looking around, I saw Christians, thousands of them, celebrating that peace. I saw services being broadcast on public screens, pastors preaching about a new era of reconciliation, praises being sung in different languages, all with choruses about hope, unity, healing of nations. But there was something wrong with those songs. They were beautiful, but hollow. They didn't talk about the cross, not even regret, not even from Jesus. It was a worship without truth. Jesus then told me something that still gives me goosebumps. This is the peace of deception. It was not born of truth, it was born of fear. It was bought with spiritual concessions. And at that moment he allowed me to see behind the scenes. I saw hidden rooms, documents signed hastily, religious leaders receiving instructions from politicians. I saw words being removed from preaching, words like sin, hell, repentance, and in their place slogans: be positive, accept everyone, question less. The worst part? I saw those who tried to warn being canceled, persecuted, even arrested. A pastor said, "This peace is false. This does not come from God." The Bible warned about this, but he was removed from the pulpit and his church was closed. I saw churches turning community centers where the main message was social well-being and citizenship. The Bible, a cultural symbol. The Holy Spirit, almost a taboo. Jesus then looked at me and his eyes were wet. This is the second trigger. Many who have walked with me will bow, not out of malice, but out of fear of appearing intolerant. They will be seduced by the promise of peace, and will forget that I am the Prince of Peace. And there I understood. This world peace that was being sold, it was not peace. It was distraction. A spiritual anesthesia to prepare the world for the biggest rupture of all. The pain I felt when I saw my brothers and sisters falling for this deception was indescribable. Not because they were bad, but because they turned away from the word. And Jesus said more. This is the age of disguise. Deception will come dressed in light. Only those who are rooted in me will see the difference. Then everything went dark, as if the world's stage was ready, but something even deeper was about to happen. When the previous vision faded, I thought it was over. My spirit was already in pieces, trying to absorb everything I had seen. But then, something happened. The ground shook. It wasn't a physical vibration. It was a spiritual tremor, as if the planet itself was crying. The atmosphere around me darkened, not like night, but like an eclipse that covered the light of the soul. Jesus said with a firm voice, as if holding his heart in tears, "Now you will see the third sign. It is the cry of creation and the response of man." On earth, he shouted. I felt it. The world moaned as if you were agonizing in childbirth, as it says in Romans 8. But this birth was not of life. It was from collective despair. I saw cities being swallowed by flash floods. I saw fires coming out of nowhere, spreading as if they had a mind of their own. Twin hurricanes devastating 2 continents at the same time. Earthquakes hitting places that had never even felt a tremor. I saw the faces of the people. Panic, confusion, anger. But what shocked me most was the reaction of the world system. Instead of turning to God, the world's leaders presented a solution. They appeared on the screens with their soft voices saying, "We are launching the United Earth Protocol. For the first time, we will integrate climate security, health and citizenship into a single global system, for your protection, for the good of all." It was the same digital structure as the first vision, only now with a new narrative. Survival. I saw huge lines of families handing over their information, scanning their bodies, accepting devices that would monitor their health, location, and environmental behavior. Some said, if it's for the planet, it's worth it. At least my children will have food. But when I looked closer, I saw the Jesus eyes become sad again. And he said to me, they traded faith for convenience. They traded free will for the illusion of security. We divided believers. Some resisted. They met in houses. They prayed. Fervently. They fasted. Others scoffed. Do you still believe in prophecy? In revelation? This is just science, progress, technology. Some churches close their doors because they refuse to cooperate with the system. Others have become government partners, promoting conscious faith and eco-theology campaigns. And then Jesus showed me a small group, but bright as fire in the middle of the darkness. They were kneeling in simple homes, with worn-out Bibles and boiling hearts. Jesus said, "These are mine. They will not be spared from pain, but they will be kept from deception." At that time, everything was silent. There were no more scenes, there was no more screaming, just the overwhelming certainty that the world had entered a new cycle, and that this cycle was in the hands of human and spiritual decisions. Jesus turned to me, and with a strength that was not anger but justice, he said, "This is the third trigger. Creation screams, and man bows before himself, but it is not the end yet, if they return to me." His pain went through me like a sword. It wasn't a punishment, it was a desperate call. And at that moment I understood the events were not inevitable, but they were ongoing, and the only force capable of stopping them was an awakening, a return, a collective regret. After the third vision, I felt broken inside. I had seen the world fall 3 times, through blind trust in the system, through the false peace of nations, and finally through the collapse of creation itself. And there, in the silence that came after, something has changed. That environment that was once made up of sights, sounds, and living scenes dissolved. I was no longer seeing the world. I was within a greater consciousness. It was neither heaven nor hell. It was as if I had been taken into the heart of truth. Jesus was before me. There was no light, no shadow, no scenery, just him and me. And there, without words, it showed me something I didn't see in the 3 triggers, the condition. It was as if my eyes were opened within the soul, and I saw what could happen if humanity turned to God. I saw the same cities that had once been swallowed by the waters, now filled with people worshiping in the open with tears in their eyes, crying out for mercy. I saw churches that were previously dormant waking up from a deep sleep, throwing away your motivational manuals and turning to the scriptures. I saw young people abandoning social networks and going to the mountains, to the fields, to the squares, praying for repentance as if their souls depended on it. I even saw world leaders, some of the same ones who once smiled on camera, now, in tears before a simple altar, without spotlights, saying, "Forgive us, Lord, we have forgotten you." And Jesus spoke to me, with power, with authority, with hope. None of this is sealed. I have shown the triggers, but the hand that activates them is that of humanity. He showed me a scale. On the one hand, the 3 triggers: system, false peace, climate control. On the other side, read prayers, tears, resignation, fidelity, true. And then he said, "If my people, who are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek me and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven." Yes, he was quoting 2 Chronicles 7:14. But there, in that place, it wasn't a quote. It was a living sentence, pulsating, like an eternal decree that was still waiting to be activated. And then something shocking came to me. Not even the Pope's death, which had happened a few days ago, was a coincidence. I saw faces in Rome in confusion. I saw crowds asking, "What does this mean? Is it a sign? Is it the end?" But Jesus showed me that even that was an invitation to spiritual reflection. Many signs are being released, not as punishment, but as an appeal. The visions I received, they are not inevitable predictions. They are warnings, heavenly alarms, red signs on the dashboard of the human soul. And Jesus made it very clear. Regret can reverse course, but indifference will seal fate. He made me see one last image before the spiritual transition began to happen within me. I saw the world divided into two groups. On the one hand, those who sought answers on screens. On the other, those who bowed their knees before the cross. And Jesus said, "Tribulation will come to purify or to judge. The choice is humanity's." I understood with absurd clarity. Everything can still change. But the time to decide is almost over. When Jesus said I should return, something inside me, it broke. There, in his presence, there was no pain, no rush, no doubt. It was as if the entire universe breathed to the rhythm of God's heart. Returning to the world was like diving back into a prison of shadows. But what hurt me the most didn't get out of there. He was knowing what was being left behind and what awaited me on the other side. I didn't beg to stay. But if he had let me choose, I wouldn't hesitate. The place I was in wasn't made of walls or landscapes. It was made of presence. Everything around, if I can call it around, vibrated in a tone of glory. It was as if his every thought became an environment. Each look, a direction. Each word, a universe. And it was there that he showed me something deeper than previous visions. We human hearts as if they were flames dancing in the wind. Some were loud, strong, intense. Others were weak, about to go out. And then, like an invisible wave, I realized that every individual spiritual decision was connected to the collective future. Jesus said to me, "The world will not be destroyed by divine decree, Daniel. You will be consumed by the absence of me, for indifference, for the constant choice to live without the truth." It was then that I understood something that made me cry spiritually. Hell is not just punishment, it's separation. It is a place where God's love is no longer felt. And if humanity continues to insist on rejecting the light, that will be the destiny. We millions of people walking like sleepwalkers, with eyes open, but without seeing. With working ears, but without listening to the call of heaven. And Jesus said, "They think they are free, but they are trapped in illusions. If only they knew how much I love them." That last sentence of his, it destroyed me inside. Because I felt it. I felt his love as a living substance. You don't want to lose anyone. There is not a human being on this earth for whom Jesus did not cry. None. At that moment, I saw a light appearing in the distance. It wasn't like the glory I was in. It was weaker, unstable, pulsing. And then I realized it was my body. It was life calling, the earth pulling me back. But before I went, Jesus spoke to me one last time. He approached and placed hand on my chest. And with the most intense eyes I've ever seen, he said, "Tell them I'm still here. That I didn't abandon them. That if you really look for me, you will find me. But time is short, Daniel. Too short." And then, the rupture came, like a tear in the soul. I was thrown out of that presence. But I didn't come back empty. I came back with fire, with truth, with a mission sealed in the bowels of the Spirit. The separation began with a vibration, not a gentle vibe. It was like my spirit was being pulled by a giant iron magnet while every part of me shouted to stay. The place where I was didn't hold me back. I was free. But still, going back was like trying to put the entire sea into a glass cup. Jesus had spoken. The mission had been delivered. But now, I needed to leave. That's when the pain started. It wasn't physical pain, a pain that does not exist in this world. The pain of leaving absolute presence, the pain of returning to oblivion, to limitations, to the blindness of the senses, the pain of knowing that There, everything made sense. And here, everything fragments. As I was pulled, I began to see layers of reality passing through me like veils being torn. Each layer seemed denser, darker, noisier. And with each transition, I felt the consciousness of eternity being drowned out by the weight of time. I saw what they looked like, faces of people I would still meet. I saw eyes searching for direction, hands outstretched, broken hearts. I also saw blind eyes laughing at the truth, mocking the light. And Jesus, even though he was already far away, still made me hear, "You will find these. You will love them, even if they reject you." Every second, the gravity of the material world pulled me stronger. And then I started to feel weight, body weight, organ weight, weight of bones, weight of pain. But I also felt something inside me that hadn't before. A second soul. Or perhaps, a spiritual consciousness pulsing along with the physical heart. It was like falling into myself, as if a piece of heaven had been sewn inside my chest. And the further I went down, the more the contrast tore me apart. On the plane where Jesus was, everything was complete. On earth, everything was divided. In heaven, love is a living substance. Here, it needs to be explained. In heaven, time does not exist. Here, he mates slowly. And then, for one last moment before breaking away from eternity, Jesus spoke. Not in voice, not in words, but with a blow straight to the center of my spirit. He said, "I'm with you until the end. It doesn't matter where you are. What you carry now is eternal." And it was at that moment that the last veil was torn. I felt the sound of the monitors, the cold of the air conditioning, the pressure of the bed, the needle in the arm, the body. But inside, I still heard the sky. I opened my eyes, but I wasn't awake. Not really. The hospital room, the machines, the lights. Everything seemed a cheap illusion compared to the reality I had just left. It was like watching a poorly staged play after experiencing the original plot. My body was there, sweating, tired, heavy as lead, but mind's soul still vibrated. I still heard it. I still saw it. I still felt heaven, as if it were inside me. The first heartbeats seemed explosions. Each breath felt wrong, clumsy, as if the spirit was trying to remember how to live in a body. The doctors spoke. The lights flickered. Someone was messing with the wires around me. But what I heard, it wasn't that. What I heard was a divine echo. The voice of Jesus still reverberated like soft thunder inside my chest. "You now carry the sound of the kingdom." And I realized, my hearing had changed. I heard the normal sounds, but also I heard the silence between the sounds, the interval between words, the intentions behind the voices, as if the world had a second soundtrack, the path of the soul. My body reacted slowly, but my spirit was alert. I saw people passing by in the hallway, and for a few seconds, I saw things I shouldn't have seen. Spiritual shadows over some, dim light in others, heavy hearts, fragmented lives, and all of this was as clear as seeing it with your eyes. I asked myself, will this pass? Will I go back to normal? But then I realized, I will never be normal again. The normal now would be live, carrying the weight of the eternal inside a fragile body. I closed my eyes out of instinct, and even so I saw. I saw the clock without hands again. He still hit. Each beat seemed louder, more urgent. And this time, he accelerated. I wanted to scream, I wanted to talk, I wanted to warn you, but my mouth was weak, and my spirit said, "Not yet. First, listen." And then I heard a phrase that it didn't come from outside, not even from me. It was the Spirit of God, preparing me for what was to come. You are an echo now. The sound you heard him will come out of your mouth, but before you tell the world, you need to let it burn inside you. Don't speak in a hurry, speak with fire. And there, lying weak between life and eternity. I understood that the mission hadn't started yet. She was forming inside me, like a sacred flame that still needed to mature. And while the doctors celebrated my recovery, I knew the real work was just beginning, and time was running out. Even with your eyes open, even with your body working, I was still with him. Not with the physical presence like before, but with something greater, an unbreakable spiritual bond. As if an invisible line connected me to the sky, a kind of cord of glory that burned within my spirit. And then, for the first time since I came back, the visions stopped. Not because they were forgotten, but why were sealed within me. And there, in the middle of that limbo between the hospital and eternity, I understood the why of everything. The 3 visions were not a sentence. They were a warning. 3 triggers. 3 choices. 3 possible paths, depending on the human response. The world system remains. Economic collapse, despair, replacement by a digital identity. It can be avoided if people stop trusting in money and trust in God again. 2. False peace between nations, empty alliances, seduced churches, diluted truths, can be canceled if spiritual leaders stand up with courage and refuse to compromise the truth. The collapse of nature, earthquakes, tsunamis, out-of-control climate, total control of man over man, can be diverted if creation is respected and humanity recognizes who created it. But all of this, it depends on one thing. Return to relationship with God. No to religion, no to tradition, no to fear, but to the presence, to the truth, to surrender. Jesus showed me that the line between salvation and deception is thinner than ever, that many who think they are saved are just following a spirituality without the cross, and that the time for neutrality is over. Anyone who tries to live in the middle of the road will be swallowed up. But he also showed me something powerful. There is a remnant, simple people, ordinary people, but with burning hearts, attentive eyes, sensitive ears. And he said, these will be like torches in the darkness. They will be persecuted, but never defeated, because they carry not only the word, but my presence. The message is simple. Clara, unpostponable. The difficult days are coming, but they are not yet written in stone. Everyone who listens, everyone who repents, everyone who turns, pushes the triggers back and delays the collapse, maybe even stop it. Hope still breathes, and she has a name, Jesus. If you're listening to this right now, it's not by chance. You can still choose, but choose soon, because the hands of the sky are already moving. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.